how can we be mindful that at a cellular level or more so level, even if your heart's beating inside, that you're in a stoic point, that you're not causing and making a situation worse than it is?
You know, what you're bringing up is being really thoughtful about our body and our thoughts, and that our thoughts help to regulate our body, and like being in full power of that, like full control. Like, think of it like a vehicle. You got the wheel, right? So I'll add to that, when we are faced in a situation where we feel like there's authority figures and they're asserting some type of power on us in a way that we feel afraid, frightened, or threatened, whether it's valid or not, again, tying back to this conversation we're having about the, current status with the immigration conversation and what is immigration, like, I like to say, like, the border crossed us. We didn't cross the border, right? So, like, natives and that whole sovereignty piece about having rightful ability to be on your native soils. But separate from all of that is, if we go back to the knowing that we have innate power, we are powerful. When we're in a situation where we don't feel like we have power because there's a system of authority being present, we have to come back to ourselves and ourselves and tell us, okay, what do I have control over? What are my rights? Your rights are, unless there's a warrant for your arrest that's signed by a judge, you do not need to comply with any request that's being made. Again, we are choosing at that point to resist, but being thoughtful around your emotions. Like, how emotional are you getting? Like you said, if it appears like you're getting violent, then you give probable cause for the powers that be, or someone who does have a position of power, whether it's valid or not in a situation. Whether it's the immigration conversation or some other, where you're in a circumstance where you feel like someone is forcing you to do something that you don't want to do. Remembering that you have inherent rights, and, say like, well, this is where advocacy for people is really important, and us standing in solidarity with each other is really important, because I'm not a lawyer. Like, I don't know the legalese. Like I just shared, this 3-4 generations now been in these lands. So in modern times, so I don't have a frame of reference of like crossing the border or like having fear about that. Like, I don't have that as a residual in my family directly in the now, although there's ripple effects with, the whole colonialization and being colonized and everything like that. And so I would just say, when we get caught up in a lot of fear, it's not helpful for us to like think about systems to protect each other, stand in solidarity with each other, find solutions, learn the legalese or learn what our rights are in these situations. We're more in survival mode, so we're not able to do any of those things. So I would, urge someone to slow down and, get a handle on the fear, because I understand it's real and it's a real thing. But this is where the idea of standing in our sovereignty is in connection to other people, our tribe, and those that are allies for, people who are in a circumstance where they're having less power in a situation for whatever reason.
I'll give you an example of something that played out for me that was like a real situation. So I wrote this letter on a piece of paper to my future self, and I was like, okay, you're putting in a position that you're going to be able to go throughout the world and do anything that you want. You're going to be able to live your purpose, something along those lines. Then I go up to a college near where I was, and there was a police officer who was following me, but I know I'm not doing anything wrong, so I was going about my day. finally, as I walk back, he approaches me and said, "There's a lot of I forgot what he said. It's like a term that a police officer would use for a homeless." And he's like, "There's a lot of vagrants and gangbangers that are walking on campus." That's how he approached me. So I know I'm not either of those, so I didn't react. But I'm like, "Oh, yeah, fuck you." Like, but I'm not gonna say. I mean, I have said that, but I'm not gonna say it in that situation. So he approaches me. And then he says, "Is it okay if I frisk you?" And I was like, "Fine." So I don't have anything on me. So when I pat my hands behind me, and he puts these two pinkies together, and then he clasped his finger around there, and then I thought he was going to cuff me. So imagine somebody growing up in a privileged family that my dad was in the military, told to never resist during anything. And my first thought when he did that I was going to be cuffed because I was worried about how my family was going to judge me was to resist. My first thought. And then what I did is, and you had talked about thoughts, and I more like talked about what you should do without telling them how to do it. But you talked about your thoughts, but I took a breath. Yeah. I took a breath in and just totally took and it was through training, it was instinctual. I mean, I probably needed untraining to know that's probably something that was natural, but living in the society that we live into, that's not natural because I was like, oh, my family is just going to, even though I was a grown-ass man at that point, I go, my family's just going to side with this because I resisted the situation to do it. Yeah. And that was a natural one. So getting into a breath of who I am when I take a mindful breath in situations like this is so much more of an empowered person. It's like a reset.
Totally. And it really does do that to your nervous system.
For sure, 100%.
Like, if you're in a stressful situation, if you just pause for a moment, give yourself that mental note, like pin it forever so it's always there. If I'm stressed, take a breath. Literally, you will feel better once you completely exhale and really allowing yourself to be with that breath. Like, don't take a quick breath.
Yeah, for sure.
Take a deep breath in, hold that breath, and release it. And by the time you are done, you will feel different. It's really amazing that we have that medicine within us. Like, we could literally
100%.
do that for ourselves just with our breath. It's pretty amazing and fascinating, really.
Even with the chemtrails, that breath is still good. Even with the chemtrails.
Even with those chemtrails.
They're fucking us from every angle, and they're not wearing condoms, and we're not consenting to this. Well, sometimes we are. Sometimes we're, but still, sometimes we're liking it. Just like the on my Tinder profile, the all resistance will be met with force. That's a joke. But we're getting fucked from all angles, and we're still surviving.
We're still surviving. I have a question for you, because you had said something earlier about like this idea of like the racial profiling situation that you had and everything, and it had me thinking like your thoughts. Okay, yeah. Your thoughts on like when one might encounter a situation where you're being profiled in some way, or you're being targeted in some way for your looks or appearance, and we've kind of touched on all this, like why people might do that. Like, if you were in that circumstance and you get offended, like that's your first response, what do you think that's about? Like, what do you think the feeling of being offended is?
So the fact that you get offended doesn't mean that you're wrong for getting offended. I just look at it from what's the best timeline for myself. Because a lot of times somebody wants to be a hero, and a lot of times a hero of a movement in today's world. I don't want to sound like an old dude. My day, we didn't want to be victims situation, but I think we're holding our victims up as heroes in a lot of situations. And I think the bravest thing is to be a victor instead of a victim. And I believe we all are victims and victors. We have a chance. But I would rather be somebody, they did this thing to me and I inspired it. I don't believe in enlightenment for people. but I believe there are enlightened opportunities for every community to be an enlightened community, and every opportunity for me to do enlightened shit. I do enlightened shit. I just don't consider myself enlightened, but I also do really dumb shit.
He's enlightened.
No.
That's interesting, yeah. Because I've had this, you sparked a reflection that I had in the past about this idea of being offended. Because I resonate with feeling that at some points in my life, but now I'm in this stage where I don't get offended. Like, I might feel disheartened by someone's maybe rudeness or brashness or lack of consideration or something like that, but I don't feel personally offended. And I think the huge piece of that is the sovereignty conversation. It's like, how much do you know that you are your own powerful being? Like, you are a nation within the outline of your physical body. You're walking with your nation every day. Like, you are your own nation. You are your own sovereign being. And then you can choose to be in relationship with others, which then is building a society or building a nation. And so, like, this idea of everyone getting offended and stuff, I do think is connected a bit to like a trauma response in a way, where we're being triggered by the wound, even if we're not fully conscious of being oppressed or being suppressed, or the lie delusion that we're not powerful, that we've been made to believe over generations, and now we don't even see our power. So now when someone says something to us that is challenging who you are, you allow it. You allow it to challenge who you are, and now you're offended. Versus, I'm hearing this thing, it's a full ass lie. And that's cool, but
I believe what you're talking about, because I have the propensity to my issue with my wellness in the past was not acknowledging that stuff was bothering me, and still that's still my default. So I let myself know that it bothers me.
Right.
But I choose not to.
You allow it to be seen.
Yeah, I allow it to be seen and do it. So there's no perfect one size fits all for the path. I allow to see it. What I would regret in any situation, that I reacted opposed to responding to a situation. And here's an example. My brother, when I was a young child, he was allergic to bees. And I remember when I was 8, like every story I have is 8, and then all of a sudden they go to 12. I think that for some reason, I like hidden, even though I'm not enlightened, I like got hidden years like Jesus did. That's the only thing we had in common. That's the only thing we had in common. So when I was 8, went down to the hospital, and my brother would have to go once a month, and then he would have it if he got stung. These shots that he would take, and I was sitting there, and I asked her, like, what's in the venom? Or what is that venom? What's in it? The thing that he's allergic to, he's being stuck with.
Right.
So I look at the fact that I have haters is the fact of it's preparing me, and it's helped me build up a tolerance with still being a feeling being. And notice, like, holy shit, I am fucking human. Somebody got under my skin. I fucking love that, because I'm like, sometimes I feel like shit doesn't bother me at all.
You can still be enlightened and be human.